Hey, Scotty, how are you?
I'm well, Ollie. Good to be back on the
Good
show.
to, yeah, good to see you again. Yeah, there's been quite a bit happening since we last spoke. So,
Yeah, a few things have been going on, in this crazy world that we live in these days.
and like, wasn't it like I think the Alpinist, that was the last thing that you were working, like one of the last projects that you were working on
Yeah,
when.
when I left Red Bull, there were a few things that were kind of finishing. Um, we had just wrapped Dear Rider, which was the Jake Burton story with
Mhm.
HBO, and that was just about to premiere. And then we had wrapped The Alpinist, which was the Marc Andre story. And that had finished, but we had not released it yet because of the pandemic. So that was those were both big projects that I was, um, you know, uh, passionate to see through. And then there was a Kai Lenny series that we had developed that I wanted to make sure was kind of going to get across the line because you know Kai's my whole career at Red Bull was in parallel with Kai coming out of the shadows and turning into the waterman that he is today. So
Yeah.
seeing that through as well. So there were a few of those things that I just wanted to get done. Even though I left Red Bull, and the Kai thing was kind of running on its own, and then it was just a matter of releasing the films, and they both did really well. They both got Emmy nominated, and the Alpinist won for best doc, and super honored to be recognized for something like that, and and also just to have the ability to tell a story about someone who is as amazing as Mark and Jake, frankly, the trust that Jake and the family had put into to the team to tell, arguably one of the most meaningful stories in my career is really special. Really.
And yeah, I mean, like that trust and gaining that from the team, from the family, from people close to them. I mean, that's kind of like almost like one of the main things, right? Of how you're going to tell that authentic story. And
Yeah, when we first started talking to Jake, he had, we had kind of the sniff test was kind of done. I mean, I had produced the U.S. Open a few different times. We crossed paths over the years, um, um, and then Red Bull had been producing the U.S. Open independently of kind of my previous career early in my life, and so he knew that we were like, in his world, right?
yeah,
We were like credibly in his world. And then of course, Art of Flight, he was a big fan, and that's it. That's all. And fourth, all of that stuff. Whether, even though they weren't Burton films, they were moving snowboarding forward. So
mhm.
that was for him kind of being the godfather of snowboarding. That was a big deal. And then his other thing was like, you guys are snowboarders, right? It was like a big deal. And we're like, oh, yeah,
Yeah.
been in the game for a long time, and so that was we got through that part and kind of passed the sniff test, if you will. And then he brought us in like super inner circle. We had gone, we basically, the crew at the very, very beginning, he was like, you just need to follow me. Like private meetings, all of it. I spent a couple days in Vermont with him where we sat in design meetings, and we sat like, business meetings. We just kind of sat in the corner, and he was like, you just need to see how I do my thing.
Were you just a fly on the wall kind of thing, or was it like
And
there
yeah,
was no direction or anything?
no, it was like literally, I
Okay.
want you to be, if you're gonna do this, then you got to
Yeah.
be in my world. And so like that's how much trust was given. And I got to give credit to Fern and Ben. They really were able to take it to the next level. And of course, we'd started production and had a plan around Jake's Jake's snowboarded 100 days. He had this 100-day thing where he would start his season at the kind of midsummer in the Southern Hemisphere. And then he would ride 100 days. And that was his goal, like every year, ride 100 days. So we were like, oh my God, what an epic, through line to like tell his story through this 100-day journey of shredding. Right. And so that was the plan. And then, we get a call about, him getting sick and it happened pretty fast that from the time that we had gotten the heads up and then the time of him passing. And then we had a conversation with the team, with the family and Donna and the boys. And it was, it was one of Jake's wishes to make sure that the film was going to be done, because Jake was pretty adamant that he didn't want to he's like, I'm not going to write a damn book. He goes, this is going to be my story. So, which, so we had to pivot, luckily though, he had, he had kept every interview he had ever done, ever.
Already?
All of them, everyone. He got a copy of everything. So
all the magazines, all the article snippets,
every interview he had ever done from the 70s until the last one he had done was with just Chinese television network as they were launching Burton in China. And that was the last one he had done. It was like within a month, maybe or so of him passing. And so we got our hands on that, and we were basically able, because we didn't get a master interview with him. And so we were able to use all of those interview bites to tell a story. Of course, we had everybody else around him, but we had that, and then we built it from there, and that kind of narrative structure. And of course, it was everybody that he had touched. I mean, everybody that he had touched that was in the world of snowboarding, that whether or not they rode for Burton or not, everyone had a passion for Jake, and his absolute, drive to make snowboarding what it is today. And so, we had no problem getting people. If anything, we probably had too many interviews, but it was a really awesome experience, and really honored again to be given that opportunity to tell such a profound story for someone who made such a big impact on myself, and kind of see that one through. So yeah, that was pretty awesome. Pretty awesome.
And would you say, I mean, like what other projects, obviously that one, but like looking back on those kind of documentaries and that, and some of the live events and things at Red Bull when you were when you were overseeing content for Red Bull Media House. I mean, what sort of, is there anything that sticks out, would you say, as like, I don't know, either a fondest memory or or a project that kind of changed the trajectory of everything?
Well, I would say McConkey was probably the one that, and we touched on this a little bit the last time we chatted, but if I look at it, like McConkey was one that kind of the value of storytelling really kind of came through. It was early in the days of Media House, but it was really like, okay, like these types of stories can translate into a bigger audience. And like, that was of course, I would have loved to tell Shane's story without Shane passing. I think it still would have done amazing. But I mean, I would say McConkey would be one for sure. I think the one lesson or the one thing I've learned is you build a rapport with the athletes and their families and their kind of inner circle, and you build that level of trust, and be it with athletes in the case of Shane or Paul or Travis, and they allow you in, and then you go along for the ride in whatever ride that is. And then to people like Jake, right, who have done, who've done big things, like, you know,
Yeah.
not saying the athletes haven't done big things, but like build, you know, sports and like kind of moved that needle forward for, you know, all of us. And that the level of that authentic relationship and that trust, that's really the thing I probably learned the most, is like, you know, if you're allowed in, it's an honor, and you have to do everything you can to deliver the best possible story that's
Yeah.
most authentic to them. And if I look back at, I mean, I think I tried to do that with all of them, all the, be it the docs or, you know, and even, even some of the serialized stuff that we did on the shorter form side, to just get in and just kind of give an authentic feel. And I think we're seeing that some of the stuff that we pioneered early in the days is now kind of taken off. Like, drive, like F1 and Drive to Survive. You know, F1 was doing great outside of the US, but then they do Drive to Survive, and you can tell the story of the drivers and all the stuff that the Super F1 fans already knew. Like, you know, they all knew what was going on, you know, within their little inner circles of chatter, but, you know, the broader audience didn't. And to see that level of storytelling scale, and now, you know, we have, you know, every different variation of that happening across every different sport, is amazing. And so I think the audience wants more of that, be it within the action adventure sports verticals or broader sports. I think that level of storytelling is awesome, but you really get there by building trust with the subjects. And if that subject is an industry leader, or if that subject is an athlete, I think it's so foundational that, you know, you have to make sure your one-on-one trust is there.
Yeah. Yeah. I recently spoke to Jeremy Grant. He was on the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
And we bumped into each other in Spain when they were filming over there.
Mm-hmm.
And he was just telling me, like, basically, like, growing up with all that crew over in Nelson, like all in his high school, right? And there's like
totally, like all those
mountain
guys,
bikers in the world, and he was just like, I'm just going to step back and film them.
Totally, because you're like, oh,
I'm not going to hit that 40K drop, you know.
Let's go for a ride, and like they're going for a ride is like, you're like, you know, I'm not jumping off of that. You know. But Jeremy, did you see he just dropped the trailer for his new scripted short?
Yeah,
I think it's called Dawn. So he's doing some cool stuff, you know. Jeremy's really actually, I've run into Jeremy in random places. I ran into him at the Peru airport in Cusco. No, it was 2 a.m. and we were in Lima flying to Cusco, and he was leaving Peru, and he was on it was like this weird 2 a.m, people sleeping in the airport kind of weird thing. And totally run into him. And I was on a mountain bike trip with Bear Claw, and we were doing like this whole, you know, Inca Trail thing. It was awesome. And he was flying back after doing like this doc and like this Peruvian culture kind of, you know, not sport kind of passion project that he was doing. It was just random. Like, Jared, what are you doing here, dude? Like, I'm like, you shooting stuff for somebody? And he's like, yeah, myself. I was like, oh, awesome. So yeah, I'm stoked for him. He's really kind of really doing it on his own, which is awesome.
Yeah. And like about that Inca Trail, did you get any tips from Hans? Because he kind of went there, like Hans Ray went there. Like,
yeah, Hans had gone there. You know, actually, he and I chatted after we had gone, but Bear Claw had gone. We had done that trip a handful of years ago. So Bear Claw had gone a year or two prior, and he had made a little mini doc on his experience. And at that point in time, he had partnered with a tourism company there. And he had, you know, set out a note to a few of the guys. It was just like, hey, I'm doing this Peru trip. Anybody in? And I was just like, talk to my wife, and she's like, yeah, go. And I'm like, sweet. I'm going to Peru. And we flew down, and we did 5 days of shuttling, you know. In Peru, like, you know, you're a high altitude. Like, you know, we get dropped off on the shuttle runs and you'd be at like 13 and a half thousand feet, and you're riding down to 9,000 on these shuttle runs. And you would do like 4 or 5 shuttle runs a day, like 10, 12, 14,000 feet of descending a day. It's awesome. And then we took a break one day and went to Machu Picchu and kind of did the tourist thing, which was also just mind-blowingly cool. And then we did one pedal day. And you're like, oh, pedal day. We're like, okay, well, you know, that's not going to be so bad. Well, the pedal day was, we got dropped off. It was a point to point where they dropped us off at this like middle of nowhere, you know, at the bottom of this pass it was 10,000 feet. And we climbed for 6.5 hours. And of the climb, about 3 of it was the bike on your back, like climbing. And we went up to almost just under 16,000 feet. And, wow. And the air got really thin. And there was literally, I think there was probably 8 of us or 10 of us in the crew. And I remember we got dropped off midday. We got to the top of the climb and it was like 4 or 5 hours later. It was like, and like the sun was going down. Like, and we were at the very top of the Andes, and we had like a 7,000 foot descent all the way back down to the town that we were staying in. And we went through like, you know, ancient quarries where they dug up these rocks the size of my house and then somehow moved them from, you know, across a river. I don't even know how they did any of this stuff. When you see it, it's mind blowing, but it was all Inca trail. And you drive right through these old villages, and it's just if you can go on a trip, like, it's like, check that one off. Like, Peru is from Mount.
Were you guided, or were you guys just?
Yeah, we had a guide. We had a guide. Like Bear Claw's partner at the time had a guiding service, and so, you know, he knew where we were going. And Claw had done, I believe, he had done all the shuttles, but I think he only had done that pedal ride. He'd only done sections of it, the lower section of it. And that one we literally got done in like it was. We got down to the town. It was dark. And I remember we were laying by the river, you know, waiting for everyone kind of to trickle in, you know, and you see people with their iPhones, with their lights on their iPhones, kind of coming down the trail. It was really pretty funny, but it was amazing. Like, absolutely amazing.
Did you guys like have to acclimatize? I remember when I went there, and there's all these things where if you go too high, like too quickly in Peru, and they have these like sort of cocoa sweets, don't they?
Yep.
And they're like,
yeah, we're all eating.
Or they make you some tea. Have some of that. That will sort you out. You'll be fine.
Yeah, you chewed on a little bit of that coca plant for sure. You know, I don't really have an issue with altitude. And I got to say, out of that trip, I don't remember anybody having a real big issue like with altitude sickness. It was more about that big day of just dealing with, you know, working out, like pushing it. Like, I didn't, you know, back then I didn't have a heart rate monitor on or anything, but if I would have, my heart rate would have been 200 or something. It would have been stupid. I mean, the amount of work your body does to just, you know, function at 13,000 feet or something is crazy. And but the funny thing is, like, the locals, like, you know, no big deal. Like, they're fully adapted and climatized to it all, and it's super easy. So a lot to be said about that, you know.
Yeah.
If I could go back there, like I would. There was so much more riding to do. And actually, Claw had just done a trip within the last couple months. I saw that he had done something down there, and I sent him an Instagram direct message, and he was like, "Oh, I got some great stories you'll appreciate." I'm like, "Okay, well, we gotta chat."
And like speaking with the like getting your body ready and like all the acclimatization with that. A question I had around Stratos and Felix's jump, like how, like, not knowing the pressures on the body and what that would take, how did you guys get your head around all the testing for that.
Well, what most people don't know is, he had several jumps up to 100,000 feet that no one even knew that he did. He had,
Okay.
they had jumps that he had done, super high altitude stuff. There's a great story. They were doing like I want to say it was like it wasn't Halo high, but it's like 35,000 feet or 40,000 feet. And the camera guy at the time, he didn't have his oxygen mask on, right? And they had opened the door to the plane, and Felix was in a suit, and at the time, the camera guy, he passes out and falls out the door.
Wow.
And wakes up in free fall, like, a few minutes of free fall into it. And Felix is like basically chasing him down. Wakes up and was just like, because by then you're in air that you can breathe, but he straight up passed out. I mean, he would have had his safety system would have taken care of it, but there was stuff like that was pretty crazy. But there was a lot of stuff that happened behind the scenes. And then plus we had all of Joe Kinniger's data from his Excelsior jumps, where they were using, early pressure suit technology. And
that was in the 60s, wasn't it? Or was it?
Yeah, late 50s, early 60s. Yeah. Okay. So, it's much different. The suit they were testing was for the U-2 spy plane. I mean, that was and then eventually turned into what, the Mercury and Gemini astronauts were using in the earliest days of the space program. So, it was, we had a lot of that to lean on. And, but what, I guess the biggest unknown was whether or not what would happen. The big kind of question was what would happen to Felix if he were to spin at Mach 1. Would he pass out? Like, would his limbs rip off? Like, no, they didn't. Joe had approached Mach 1, potentially had broken the sound barrier, but they didn't have a way to measure it back then. So they weren't quite sure like what would happen, right, to Felix's body. So that was the biggest unknown, was whether or not his body could handle Mach, and then the G's of the potential spin, because the spin was definitely a known factor. And then when he went into the spin, and the reason why the fly feed cut to the control room was because that was the plan, is if that was something were to happen, that was going to be the plan. And they just weren't sure, if he's going to like recover out of it. And obviously he did, but that was a pretty significant thing. As a matter of fact, actually it was funny. We had the 10-year anniversary was in October, and they flew us all out to Germany for it. We all kind of got together, which was pretty cool. And the great thing about the chat about all this stuff, a decade later, was awesome. Especially Felix, looking back at it, he's,
what was he saying about it?
He's very humbled by it now. I think, he was, having the time away from the project and away from, he doesn't skydive or base jump or any of that anymore. He does backflips of helicopters now, which is safer, I guess. But his whole perspective on it has changed, and his appreciation for the team and, all of it is definitely much more significant. And, but it's funny, we were just chatting about like the crazy milestones, the crazy things that happened, like like the story, like that story that like the camera guy is a Red Bull athlete named Luke Aiken. So Luke was the guy who did the plane swap thing. So, and Luke also has done a few other pretty crazy skydive things. So, those types of stories come out, right? And now that you can look back at it all, y'all kind of laugh about it and move on. It's pretty good.
That's nuts. Yeah. And like, you had so many things that you were balancing, like there, right? I mean, kind of overseeing the project, everything from the equipment and figuring out the cameras. I remember you saying that, right? And just kind of making
Well,
sure that,
yeah, the camera, like even figuring out the camera technology and like who builds that stuff, and you know, you got to develop all that. You know, the camera technology was one thing, but you know, I'll tell you the one thing that was really, you know, looking back at it after even we spoke last, that's probably the most significant thing was, you know, we had developed remote production a decade ago. You know, what is now normal because of the pandemic.
yeah,
You know, we were doing we were doing in the capsule, right? You know, the capsule had like the equivalent of a small OB van smashed into, you know, this is what they called the keg, which was looked like a beer keg of electronics. That was all the switchers and everything you would need for a live event. You know, we had smashed down into this little container and then had to manage it remotely. And that was all done. I mean, that had really not had been done before. So even that remote production stuff, that's, you know, normal now. We were way ahead of the game on. So, but there was just a lot of innovation and a lot of like, you know, sitting in a room and figuring it out, you know,
yeah.
every milestone. And that's what, you know, that kind of stuff was the reason why it took as long as it did. So many things outside of the jump itself were had never been done before, and so, and especially not done by a brand. So all of that was new territory.
Yeah, and almost crashing YouTube.
And then almost crashing YouTube, yeah. Which is actually, it was really interesting when they had done the there was a doc that had been done, like a 10-year look back, and they have some of the YouTube guys that talk about that moment, or like the whole story. And you know, the engineer's perspective of it was like, holy shit, like this is, we're going in a territory that we never thought we'd ever see. And so you know, it was cool to kind of see them speak about it too, because you know, you remember it from your point of view, but you don't really get it from, you know, the guys who boots on the ground, who dealt with it, with the red lights in their faces, if you will. So yeah, pretty amazing.
And like, I mean, now like leading back up to more kind of present day, and like your interest in space, and then working for Space Perspective, like, did that kind of, would you say that was sort of linked to the Stratos project?
Oh,
Like
it was fully linked to Stratos. Like, so I had gotten a call from my old boss, Werner Brau, and he was like, "Hey, I got a recruiter called me for this company, Space Perspective. They're doing balloon rides to edge of space, like Stratos without the jump." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I think I saw that on CNN, you know, announcement video or something on CNN." And he's like, "Yeah, it's them." He's like, "They're looking for someone to head up content." I was like, "Oh, well, yeah, throw them my way." So I was working on a few side projects, and I had, you know, still hadn't found kind of my next thing yet. And I was like, oh, you know, didn't really think that space would be like the thing, but super interesting. Always been a space geek kind of secretly, you know, going to NASA as a kid and watching Space Shuttle, all that kind of stuff. And so, so I met with them. I went out to, you know, their offices at Kennedy Space Center. So I went out to Kennedy and met with them, and you know, we were like, I was like, hey, you know, they were like, you know, there's an opportunity to be the storytellers in the space vertical, because right now with, you know, Elon's doing his thing, and he, you know, he's allowing stories to be told around him, but he's not a focus for him. He's focus is going to Mars. And then Bezos, you know, he's got the infrastructure to tell stories, but he's not really telling his own story. So with Blue Origin, and so there's, you know, and then Virgin, you know, Branson wasn't really telling. I mean, they had told some, but really hadn't gone there, and so no one was really telling the space story outside of, you know, some Nat Geo stuff here or there. And so they're like, we want to be the storytellers in the space vertical. And what you did with Stratos was a pretty significant milestone within kind of that storytelling area, vertical within the space kind of identity over the last decade or so. So yeah, so I was like, okay, well, let's try it out. And it was super cool. You know, I have a, you know, I just turned my NASA badge back in. I had a NASA badge, which was pretty awesome. You know, being able to drive around Kennedy Space Center and drive up to the Artemis rocket while I was on the launch pad was pretty, like, as someone who, you know,
That's
grew up
crazy, man.
watching, you know, space shuttles and, you know, the last of the Apollo missions, and, you know, been fascinated with space my whole life, to be able to like drive onto, you know, the sacred ground of space travel. And just
Yeah.
like, you know, like I was like, I wonder how far I can go. So at lunch one day, I just kept on driving through security gates until I got to about like a mile away from the rocket. And I was
Really?
like,
Were
yeah.
you like peeking in like warehouses and stuff and having little looks?
Yeah, you know, yeah, yes and no. You know, you drive up and you kind of look around, and like the VAB, which is the vertical assembly building, that big building that, you know, you see them put the space shuttle on top of the boosters and stuff. Like, you know, you can stick your head in there. You know, that's where they
Yeah.
build rockets. Like, you can do that. But it was pretty. It was a pretty special experience, and one that, you know, I never thought in my career I would ever have. And looking back at it, it was really, really pretty awesome. And got to meet some really amazing people, um, unbelievable stories, because, you know, the space industry is not very big. So you have a lot of people who worked on, you know, I had people that work at Space Perspective that also worked on Stratos. That, you know, the team at Space Perspective worked on Alan Hustis' jump, which broke Felix's record. He's the Google exec that broke all of Felix's, all but one of the records. And then all the teams, like, you know, it's SpaceX people, carbon people, balloon people, like people from all over the space industry, but which again isn't very big. All just intersected in this company, and really, really pretty special group of people, and a great opportunity to learn about this nascent industry. And I'll tell you, like, in a, you know, weird little facts, like a rocket goes to space almost every day. It's from somewhere
No.
around the world.
Really?
Yeah, there's an app called Space Launch Now, and if you get it, it basically will tell you every single rocket that's going up. And SpaceX will launch a rocket like once a week, maybe one every 2 weeks, probably 3 or 4 a month ish. Sometimes it's two in 1 week. Hell,
Okay.
there was one day it was 3 in 2 days. You know, one from Vandenberg, one from Kennedy, one from Texas. Like, it is unbelievable how much like stuff is going up, and how often it's happening. So, you know, once you kind of realize that, and you're like, oh wow, like, it's like this business is moving faster than most people think. And then, you know, there's 2 private space stations being built right now. You know, most people don't know that either. And both of them have hotels in them. So
That's crazy.
You know, our kids will be able to go to space for vacation.
You reckon that soon?
Oh yeah, no doubt. I mean, the Axiom, which is one of the private space station companies, their space station is supposed to be online by 2026. So the first portions of it, I think, fully operational by 29, and they have like the whole wheel that spins for the gravity and like all of it. Mm-hmm. And part of that space station will be leased back to governments, because the International Space Station is going to come down eventually. It'll be out of service here pretty soon. So, you know, private's going to replace public. And so it's going to be super interesting when we get to that point. But there's a lot of interesting milestones, you know, back to the moon with Artemis 2, well, actually Artemis 3 or 4, when they land back on the moon, and then Mars too. So there's a lot of interesting milestones that are going to happen. And just kind of having this, like this, you know, this childish kind of insight with it was pretty awesome. Yeah. You know, pretty awesome.
Was like space, was there, their goal with it, with the company, they were kind of looking at like how they would make space travel. That was kind of,
they wanted to make,
it was the main thing, right?
They want to give the quintessential space experience to as many people as possible. So, and that quintessential experience is seeing the Earth from above. So seeing the Earth from above, there's this experience called the overview effect, which only about 600 people have got to experience, maybe 620, which is you actually get to see the Earth for what it is, which is this island ball within the vastness of nothing, like, right? And to understand how special our planet is. And of those people who have the overview effect, they come back and they tend to lean into protecting the planet because they understand how unique and special it is. And that, you know, because they've seen the thinness of the atmosphere and the blackness of space with the juxtaposition of this blue ball in front of it. And so, you know, from my take, you know, the more people who can experience that, especially people who have the means, are the people, usually the people who have the means also have the means to make the change. You put board members, C-suite, you know, executives in those, give them those experiences. Those are the ones that can actually make the change versus governments. Governments, there's blue tape, red tape, and all the crap and politics and all that shit to get through. But the corporations, they can say, you know what? I'm going to shift to green energy faster. I'm going to shift my timeline up. We're going to go with an all electric fleet. We're going to do, you know, they can make those decisions. If they,
do you reckon they would though? Just from like getting that perspective of kind of seeing it.
I would hope so. I want to have a little hope for humanity that way. I would hope so. I would think that the experience is so profound that it drives them that way. You know, and there's a lot of interest in you know, in it. And so I think the more people who go up, the better. And you go from there. I think that's the opportunity. And I think the faster a planet starts being prioritized as something to protect versus something to, you know, use all up.
Yeah. And your kind of idea back then that was to kind of put some unique content.
Like tell an overview story, you know, with space perspective, the capsule's it's unique. You can move, it's modular. The interior is modular. So, you know, different ways to use the interior for, you know, be it, you know, talk shows or, you know, a set or music or first evers, like, you know, there's all these different ideas that we were kind of coming up with, that we had a unique position because, you know, the balloon can go up, you know, as many times as it needs to, right? You know, you can launch as long as you had another balloon in the wind conditions were good. You could launch it every day if you had to, as long as it was, you know, the winds were good. So, and you had a new balloon. Like that's a huge opportunity, and it's so gentle because it's, you know, it's I think a 12-mile-an-hour ascent and a 12-mile-an-hour descent. So it's super gentle. That I think the opportunity is more people can go and there's more opportunity to tell stories because it's so easy, right? And not freaking scary, right? You know, if you think about, you know, strapping yourself to a rocket. And like,
exactly, right.
It's like take the whole idea of a roller coaster and, you know, throw jet fuel on it and see what happens. So yeah.
And then you catch people off guard as well. So if you're kind of like, if you're speaking to them or if they're being interviewed, it's not like if they're in a studio and they're famous and they're like, you know, I've done this 100 times kind of thing.
For sure. Right.
They're on a runway or whatever.
Totally. Like you're not like, who's going to be able to really hold it together at 100,000 feet? Like really, like maybe some U-2 spy plane guys or, you know, Air Force guys or, you know, other astronauts that, you know, lived in the space station, like those types. Sure. You know, but if you're talking to Ben Affleck, he's going to be like, you know, beside himself looking at, you know, like, you know, the fact that he could see 500 miles or 600 miles in every direction and the curvature of the earth and the colors and everything else that you're going to be presented with, be really hard, you know, because, you know, no matter who you are, we're all human and we can all appreciate this precious planet that we have. And for the most part, I think, you know, a lot of it, we take it for granted. And
Yeah.
when you're in that situation, it's pretty hard to take it for granted when it's laid out in front of you. You know,
Well, like I don't think you can, right? I mean, it's
no, I don't
you know,
think you can.
if you're kind of doing any, like, if you're getting outdoors, if you're getting in the water, whatever it may be, but if you're lucky enough to kind of be able to do those things, but if you are like, you know, if you're stuck in an urban environment, a city, you know, you don't see anything, right? So it's kind
No,
of,
you don't. But there's, you know, but there's different ways to kind of see everything from above. Like, you know, a few years ago, I was in New York and I had some time off. A meeting got canceled or something, and I had the afternoon to burn. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go and have lunch at One World Trade Center. So I went down and I went up to the 115th, 20th floor, whatever it was. And there's a viewing deck up there, and there's a cafe, and I just soloed it. And I was just up there, and you're eating lunch at the window, and you're looking at helicopters flying below you with all of Manhattan below you, right? And it was a pretty surreal moment to be like, wow, like, you know, you can kind of get a little bit of like that standing on top of a mountain feeling. You know, we've all, you know, if you had the luxury of being on top of a mountain over a city, it's a pretty like dynamic experience, right? You know, you're like, whoa, there's a lot down there, but I'm up here. You get that when you're in the city at the very top of a high, tall building. And there's not many tall buildings that you can go and do that with. Obviously, there's a Sears Tower or something like that in Chicago, One World Trade in New York, Burj Dubai, right? But there's not many of them. And so that perspective, I think, really kind of is unique too, and can kind of give it a little bit of that same sense.
Yeah. Nice. And like, where did you go then from there? Like,
well, so I was there, and it was, you know, it kind of wasn't, you know, the space business is slow, and it was kind of work. It kind of wasn't like my timelines were different than their timelines, and so we kind of collectively decide like, all right, well, maybe this isn't the best thing. So looked at a transition plan, and then I got a call from a friend of mine that I used to work with at Red Bull, and he's like, we have a mutual friend that we used to work with back when I started early days, and he had his partner had worked for Red Bull's like agency, you know, the agency called Kastner Partners, and Kastner was Johannes Kastner, the guy who started the agency. He's the one who came up with Red Bull Gives You Wings. And he was very much connected, like him and Mr. Modeschitz were very close in terms of the early days. And so, so they were the ones that do all of Red Bull's advertising work. So, you know, they had been there my first 3 or 4 years at Red Bull. And, you know, we played in, like, there weren't many of us on the, you know, within that part of the business. And, you know, all kind of cut from the same wood, like good dudes. And when they left, they started a small agency called Mistress. And I had hired Mistress to do a Fluke Talk show for us, kind of at that time we had done like 5 or 6 Fluke Talks in 1 week all over the US. And we had done this reality show on building crafts and like following the teams and all that kind of stuff. And I had them do it. And it was one of their first like productions. And it was one of our first non-event productions. So this was like, you know, way pre-Red Bull TV and kind of pre-Art of Flight. It was probably 2009-ish. And, you know, they had then taken that, and then they had done this big Hot Wheels initiative where they basically built real Hot Wheel cars, like physical real ones, and real tracks, and basically broke all the world records and the loop-de-loops and everything. So they had done that. And then, you know, their business started thriving, and but they had modeled it a lot along the lines of how we had modeled the early media house. And so they're looking for someone to head up their production arm, and so we kind of connected the dots and started talking to them, and kind of where did they wanted to go with it. And they're here in LA, and you know, their offices are really right on the beach in Pacific Palisades. And I was eager to get back into an office and kind of have a semblance of kind of pre-pandemic normalcy. And
yeah,
then
you were saying that, right? Just to kind of be like around
just around
other
people,
humans.
right?
Exactly.
I just want to be around people. And so I was eager to get back into an office and get back into that environment. And then, but they were also, I didn't need to, like, there are people who knew who I am and who worked with me in the past. And we quickly gelled, and they're like, okay. And they were looking for someone specifically not from the agency space. As our advertising world is like obviously evolving, they wanted someone who comes in with a kind of a fresh perspective. And then with my Red Bull background, I'm kind of thinking as a marketer, I also have a kind of a unique angle, because I wouldn't call myself a marketer because I don't wear that hat. But you know, having spent as much time at Red Bull as I have, you tend to get, you know, a marketing graduate degree without knowing it. So I have that kind of instilled in me. And so that's worked out really well. And I'm a few months in now, and it's been really fun. And we have a lot of fun development stuff in the motion right now, and looking forward to seeing where it goes.
And like anything that you can talk about, any kind of projects?
Anything to talk about right now? Nothing now, but next time we chat, I'll be able to talk about a few things.
Nice. Cool, man. Yeah, I mean, like now kind of like, where do you see, I guess, content going? Like we were talking about like F1 and all like,
yeah, I think
that pattern. Do you reckon is it gonna continue doing that, or do you reckon it's kind of?
Well, I think a couple of things are going to happen. I think you're going to continue. I think the audience is going to want to know more about their heroes and how their heroes live their lives. And I think the athletes have now grown up in an environment where, you know, they have been participating even before they were professional athletes within the social media and the media environment. They understand that that's part of the deal now, where the generation before, it was kind of added on later. So you have this new generation who are already storytellers in their own right. They already have their own audiences, their own channels. So I think you're going to see more of that. And I think you'll see more athletes wanting to tell more stories from their perspective. So I think that will continue. And I think that will, I think formats will kind of come and go as they will. I think the Drive to Survive format is really pretty cool. If you look at the team environments and how that works, we'll see how Full Swing does with the kind of singular golf environment, because it's a different beast. But again, I think there's something there. So I think that'll continue to go. And then I also think that the young creators, the ones that are doing the reels and the TikTok stories and are able to produce quickly and lo-fi and know how to connect to a Gen Z and young millennial audience. I think as they grow, they're going to be able to take the learnings from speaking to that audience as well as they have, and take that into a broader storytelling. That's going to be really interesting, is starting to see, you know, those creators / producer types grow into longer form, but taking all the learnings they have from this shorter ecosystem and putting it into a longer one. So, because they know how to connect to that audience better than I do, because I've aged out of that. So I have to lean on experts at that generation to be able to see eye to eye with them. So I think there's opportunity there for sure. And then I think, you know, we're seeing where, you know, video games driving story narratives now. You know, that's going to be a bigger play as well. I also think that the video game space, the esports space, is ripe for more storytelling, because it's a, you know, it, like the action sports space, super contained, and a lot of the outsiders don't fully understand it. So being able to kind of crack the code, I think there's opportunity there as well. So I think those are some of the areas. I think there's some potential growth, and then and of course, legacy stories within our collective space will continue to happen, and there's more epic stories to be told, I believe, within our world.
Yeah. And do you reckon, like, with those creators who are kind of doing it on a low budget, are they, like, I guess, looking out to some of the YouTubers, people that have been super successful, say like Mr. Beast, for example, and then looking at, like, I don't know, that's almost the goal or like the pinnacle of where they want to be on content, and sort of just make that production a bit higher? And
well, I think the ones that have really kind of figured it out organically, kind of, they go from run and gun themselves, and then they start having a small crew, and then they kind of get to a point where from my experience, they get to a point where they have all they need, and they don't need any more, in order to keep themselves engaged, and also have enough to make sure it's done at the right level, and they're able to kind of to go with the flow. As the flow is beginning to change, like the formatting has changed, the algorithms change, and they're able to adapt relatively quickly. And I think the learning is, the bigger the team, the more complex it is to go with the changing algorithms and go with how things tweak. And those small run and gun teams are able to do that really quick, right? They're able to adapt really fast. If they can stay that way, and then add in some operational infrastructure to make sure that your rights are cleared, and your clearances are in place, because as they scale, those are the things that will start coming to bite them. When you're young and small, you can kind of let that stuff slide, but the bigger you go, the bigger your target on your back.
And you can stay nimble as well, right? Like, whenever they're like different, obviously there'll be different platforms and different things will come and go, and being able to sort of not commit all in one thing and go, okay, we can switch. And go whatever the next TikTok's going to be, right? And
totally, kind of, because who knows, like TikTok could go away, right? And then what's the next TikTok? What's the next format? Because it's all going to be like that. There'll be something else, right? I mean, that's the beauty of kind of our digital world. You don't know what it's going to be, but you just be ready for the next thing, right?
Yeah. And, like, out of interest, are you guys doing anything in like AI and like that?
Oh yeah, like AI is a big one. Like I use like right now, my team has a KPI to have use AI on every single production in some form.
Really?
Be it ChatGPT for research, be it we're testing out different AI editing tools to fast edit. We used on the agency side, they used an AI called Midjourney, which is a graphics AI, which so they to test it out and kind of prove to the organization how cool it was. They made the creative group made 300 custom Christmas cards for current and past and future clients. They did it in 4 days with 2 designers, 300 custom cards. And
it's amazing, isn't it?
For a cost of maybe $200 for the license to get access, and they were all awesome, like Santa doing all time, like literally, like, so I don't know how much you've played with those types of things, but it's like it's a rabbit hole. You start going down the hole, and you're just like, wow. And even something like ChatGPT is an amazing tool that we're only scratching the surface on how to use. And I think there's been a lot of chats like, oh, it's going to take our job away. It's like, it's going to take your job away if you don't figure out how to use it.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's just a matter of it's just another tool, but it's a tool you can't ignore. It's like saying, I think it's not
going away
the same level as the internet, but it's close, right? It's going to be a tool that will, in fact, that'll be used in every walk of life across the board. And it's already being used everywhere. We just don't realize it. There's an AI running search engines and stuff. It's already there behind the scenes in lots of areas. It's just like, when will we have a Jarvis? And I think it's probably sooner than you think.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's cool to hear that the agency's kind of, yeah, getting stuck in,
Oh
and
no, like,
obviously
right. Yeah.
being,
It's a big focus for us. Big focus, man. We have a big meeting next week, and there's a big AI presentation. I've got a big AR, VR, XR presentation as well, and all that stuff is in motion. So yeah, it's an exciting time in the media space for sure, especially with these emerging technologies kind of smashing together.
yeah. And what about the VR like uptake? Do you reckon? Can you see?
VR, I think now that the pandemic is we're on the other side of it, people are more willing to put headsets on. I think VR is going to have a slower trajectory. I think AR wearables are really going to be the next big thing. And Apple's supposed to release their AR glasses. They're going to be really expensive at the end of the year. When that price point comes down to something near a phone, then I think you're going to start seeing scale with AR, and that's going to be a game changer in terms of use case and what you can do with it from storytelling as well as from advertising and kind of all areas. It's really pretty. I mean, I've been lucky enough to be given some demos of kind of what's to come, and it's pretty crazy.
What are they trying to charge when it comes out? It would be like over $1,000.
The rumor on the price point on the Apple is like $3,000, I believe.
Okay.
But if you look at Magic Leap, those are $3,500.
Yeah, there are so many. I guess there's so much hype around all these different things as soon as they come out, right? Whether what is going to sort of get taken on. But on the AI side of things, I mean, just from messing around with it here, I kind of, you just see like for day-to-day job stuff, and that's just kind of like one way of looking at it. Let alone going, okay, if you dig in a bit more, what can be done?
Well, I mean, for you, if you look at I imagine for all your guests, you do research, right?
Yeah.
You could literally go into ChatGPT and have them do it all for you.
Yeah.
You could put the subject matter in, put my name in. I haven't done it yet, but put your name in, and then like, what has he done? Where's he going? What, like, literally, and it'll do it all for you. You can see you'll see it spell it all out for you.
Yeah.
And then you just dig in the levels deeper, and then you can ask it like, what questions would you ask this person? And it'll come up with a list of questions. It like you start using it as like you're an assistant that you don't need to pay. Like someone who's is super connected into the world, that you can kind of give a task and they'll execute it within a matter of seconds.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been doing a lot of research for different projects, and what I can get done in a matter of minutes would have taken me days in just research time alone.
Yeah.
And then
that's just ideas, right? That's just ideation stuff.
Yeah. And then you could take, like, let's say it's the history of something, right? And then you could let's say you get the whole history, and then you could ask it to build it into a 3-act structure.
Yeah. And
then it'll break down that and give you like, the intro would be this, and then and the conclusion, like it'll do it all for you. It's pretty amazing. Especially when you really start figuring out like the different ways to give it actions, the different prompts you can give. The more detail in the prompt, the deeper it'll go. And that's really where the skill comes into play, is like understanding the types of prompts you need to give it in order to get the answers you want.
Yeah.
And that's on like the chat side. And then you start getting into the graphic side. If you really understand the prompts, then you could and even some of like the new ones like Midjourney also allows you to take and put a picture in, an image in, and then you build around the image. So think about like logos, like a logo development. Like logo development, you're calling up your buddy who's a graphic artist, and then like you could literally just be like, okay, my logo, like logo development. Here's the name of the show of it. Like give you 10 different looks, and it happens. You're like, okay, I like this one. Give it more detail on this and change the color to this, and that happens. And like literally, you could be done with your logo in a matter of just like an hour, where you would have struggled and you would have paid and you would have gone through all these hoops, and like that part of it is going to take people's jobs away for sure.
Yeah.
But if you're really looking at like sophisticated design, the designer who knows how to use it can take it, get a base, and then build on it. Because those minor details, it doesn't do as well as a human can do. But getting the base there, it can get you there really fast. And that even
especially with editing. Yeah, with all that creativity, right? It's like with everything. Like everyone's like, oh, there's not going to be needed for journalists anymore. It's like, oh, that's ridiculous. Well, it's like the quality will kind of.
Well, I think most people don't realize, like, big chunk of the New York Times and the newspapers, they've been using AI for the last handful of years, writing stories. Like that already exists. Like, so it's just a matter of you fact check, because the AI isn't always the best at making sure the nuance is there. So you got to make sure that that's there. But you can be 10 steps ahead across everything you do if you know how to use a tool the right way. And it'll be those people who really understand that. Now, will it get to a point where it doesn't need that anymore? Absolutely, because it'll be smart enough to know what good looks like. It's just, it's like a baby right now in terms of its intelligence. Depending on which ones you're using, right? They're slowly learning. And in some cases, they're specifically kept dumb in order for them not to learn too much too soon. So there's going to be an interesting conversation about how much you allow it to learn. And
like the ethics around it, you mean, right?
And ethically. And then do you allow it to connect to other AIs to work together?
Yeah.
Because let's just say you had an AI that did graphics and an AI that wrote a story. Well, if the AI that was writing a story could talk to the AI that's doing the graphics, then all of it could be done in a matter of just minutes, right? Like a story or a book or whatever could be done. You'd be like, hey, make me an image that does this. Or like, hey, in the story, this is where an image would be great. Okay, image get made. Okay, there it is. And then it just happens. So things that we organically think about it takes us a little longer to process. It could do it in a matter of seconds because it has, access to all of the world's knowledge, and it knows how to get to it fast, and the ability to create on a graphic side as well. So it kind of takes both sides of our brains and kind of mashes them into one. So that'll be another ethical thing. Like, okay, are we going to allow this to happen? Is there a human moderator in there that kind of goes back and forth? Like, how does that work? But it is fascinating. And something that, I didn't think I was going to, really get that into until you really start playing with it. And then, I find myself, if I start getting into like an AI session, then 2 hours will go by and I'll create a whole bunch of stuff. And then like I was talking to Derek Westerland from Freeride the other day, and he was going heli skiing and up in BC, and I was telling him about the AI tools, and I was like, I'm going to send you something I made while we were talking. And it was like this, it was an image of a guy powder skiing, in BC, but it was all graphically made. If you saw the image from far away, you would have thought it was a photograph. And I did it in like 45 seconds. It was literally like, I just put the prompts in, like skier, powder, British Columbia, Bluebird, like the prompts and it literally spit it out and like did one little tweak to it. And then I sent it to him and he was just like, holy shit. I'm like, I did that in like 45 seconds. And he was just like, wow. So you start doing that and you start building that workflow into the pitch process and into all types of stuff. You'll be able to move the needle relatively quickly, especially if you can discipline yourself on when and where to use it. And then, and then build on, successes across the board. So that's a lot of exciting stuff happening.
Yeah, nice. Cool, man. Well, if people, if they want to get in contact with you, what's the best way of reaching out? And
well, LinkedIn always is great. And then at the Mini email address, it's scott.bradfield@themini.com, and then or scottybradfield@gmail, either way. But always happy to chat and take on new opportunities, and always good to connect with people too. As I'm getting older, I want to share as much as I can to the next generation and help them kind of take the baton to the next level. So love to connect with anybody. And matter of fact, one of the guys at work's got a nephew in town from Australia, and it's been awesome just talking story with him, because he was just like, art of flight questions and all that stuff. And I'm like, yeah, there's a version of the movie that no one's seen. He was like, what? I was like, yeah, a few of us have it. I was like, I'll show it to you. He was like, okay, awesome. Stuff like that. Like, it's pretty fun, like fun stuff like that, which is pretty rad.
Yeah, that's cool. And just stoking people out on different things, right? Whatever the
I mean, if we can, I was inspired. If I can help somebody, motivate them to do something awesome, then awesome. I kind of see where I am in my career. Like, that's my responsibility to kind of inspire the next generation to keep it moving. Right. The world, like our world that we play in, is only getting more interesting, and there's more people participating in all these awesome sports that we do. And if we can, we just need the stories to be told, and that next generation to kind of be inspired to kind of push the needle forward, and we'll see where it goes.
Nice, awesome. Well, Scotty, thanks so much, man.
Thank you. It's always good to chat. It's always good to chat.
Thanks, dude.